Pre-Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and man, you guys are in for a treat. You guys get 2 episodes this week. When's the last time we've given you guys 2 episodes, not counting the United Soccer Coaches Convention episodes? But it's an absolute pleasure of mine. You guys heard part 1 on the It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia podcast feed. And now we're going to hear part 2 of our conversation. And if you guys haven't heard part 2, maybe you guys don't even know what It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia is. Well, we'll tell you a little bit about that here. But joining the podcast for the first time is Kevin Kinkead. Kevin, how you doing?
Good, man. Long time no see, man. Nice to do this little 2-part series. It's like a home and home in the NBA or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's had a blast on your podcast and listening to your podcast for a while now. And so to be invited on now to have you on the podcast, now we come full circle. And like I did with any new guests, I mean, it's kind of crazy to me if people don't know who you are, Kevin. But, you know, like we talked about on your show, there are a ton of new Union fans. And so maybe they don't know who Kevin Kinkead is. So for my listeners, can you tell them a little bit how you got into soccer, how you got into the whole media landscape?
Yeah, sure. So, I grew up in Upper Montco and went to high school at Boyertown. I played soccer there. I was a co-captain, but kind of a late bloomer, so I was never going to play in college. So I went to college for journalism and got out of West Virginia. And then I came back to Philly after a couple of years, and I was working at Eyewitness News. And I was a writer and a producer and a photographer at Eyewitness News. And I was working per diem hours there. So I'd work anywhere from like 25 to 45 hours a week, depending on what they had for me. So I was always like, looking to add some stuff on the side to kind of round out my hours and try to make it more consistent. And back in 2010, it was the first year of the union's existence. And the guy who was running the website back then, it was a guy named Judah Levine. He put out a thing on Facebook that said that they were looking for people to help contribute and write stories for the website. And I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. Because I grew up loving the sport and grew up in the region, obviously. And I thought it'd be cool to get in, on the ground floor and like have something to do with the team from year one, I found that attractive. Right. So I sent them like I'll never forget this. I sent them a demo article, like a writing example. Right. And I made the pitch for Sebastian Letou to play for the French national team. It's just like funny when you think about it now. He was like, had a damn good season back then. He had like 10 goals or something at that point. So I was like, why not? But so Judah was like, yeah, why don't you come down and you can do some stuff for us. So that was great. I was just looking for something else on my resume at that point. So, I worked for the team for 4 years and they started paying me, which was nice. And, then I left the team in 2014, went independent. I was doing stuff for Eyewitness News and Philly Soccer Page and Philly Voice and all that stuff. And had like a pretty good 7 or 8 year run, doing consistent stuff for them. And then when I left to join Crossing Broad in 2017, I kept doing It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia and linked up with Sean and the guys at the Gambler to do the post game show. So I've had something to do with the team and have been able to contribute some kind of media or writing or analysis to the team since year number 1. So it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're an OG Union podcast, one of the first, maybe the first. I mean, like I said, you and Joe Tanzi are the first 2 that come to mind when I think of Union podcasts. And I know we haven't seen Joe do his thing, but I think he's supposed to be starting that podcast back up. So nice to see
Union Soccer podcast with Sean. Yeah, there were some that actually came, but they're not operating anymore. But there were some that were around during the early days. Like the KYW Philly Soccer Show was one with Greg Orlandini and Eli Perlman-Storch would do that one. There was the World Soccer Show that Eric Nash used to do on WWDB 860 AM, I guess. So there were some early shows back then. Some of them, obviously most of those are not operating anymore, but it was cool. It was fun doing those.
Yeah, for sure. And it's crazy too, where you look like this is a perfect time to get into the Union where they've been outstanding the last 5 seasons. So it's like, yeah, if people want to cover this team, if they want to talk about this team, this is the best time. I'm glad to have you on the podcast talking about, you going working with the team in that independent media. And a lot of us, I'm sure, have seen the news with Vox Media axing SB Nation's MLS and hockey coverage, and that went into effect, I believe, January 20th. They announced Vox that they would be cutting funding to their SB Nation sites that cover MLS and hockey. And in a statement Vox sent to employees, they said, "Unfortunately, in this economic climate, we're not able to sustain projects in areas of the business that have not performed as anticipated, are less core to where we see the biggest opportunities in the coming years, or where we don't have enough rationale to support ongoing investments in what could be a prolonged downturn." And the only two MLS sites that I found out that survived the cuts were Sounders at Heart and Dirty South Soccer, obviously. Sounders at Heart, that's the Seattle Sounders SB Nation site, and then Dirty South Soccer, they cover Atlanta United. But it's crazy to me that they would cut coverage of their MLS sites with the World Cup coming in 2026. It's like soccer is growing here in America. And for whatever reason, they say, yeah, we're going to make cuts to MLS and hockey when the World Cup's just around the corner. It makes no sense to me. And you know this better than anyone, Kevin. When you look at the press boxes in MLS, majority of the people in those press boxes are freelance journalists. Not many people are getting paid to cover MLS, and the majority of those freelance journalists were working for those SB Nation sites. And I think this could be problematic for some MLS clubs where the coverage is going to be significantly impacted. And I look at the New York Red Bulls market where no local paper reporters are covering the team. Majority of the people that were covering the Red Bulls were from Once a Metro, who were a part of the SB Nation team. So, I mean, what are your thoughts of Vox just getting rid of their MLS coverage?
Oh man, yeah. How much time do we have here? I think you got to start at the top too. Vox is a company that's always kind of been on rocky footing when it comes to their employees and their coverage and the way that they operate. You go back a couple of years now. Vox employees wanted to, they made a big effort to unionize to get what they felt were fair wages and to collectively bargain for a contract and earn what they thought that they were worth. Then there was a lawsuit that was filed against the company. There was, I think, a round of layoffs that preceded this one, and then Vox, comes out a couple of weeks ago and says we're, going to shutter most of the hockey and soccer sites. And so they've always just been they've been a company that just kind of cast this massive net over everything, right? There was an SB Nation site for everything, right? And it was great because you'd have people, it would give people a platform who wanted a side hustle or they wanted a hobby in addition to a full-time job where they could get in a press box and get a credential and do some writing and do some decent coverage. I mean, they produced a lot of good, talented people over the years. I mean, what Matt and Greg do at Brotherly Game is fantastic. And, you have a bunch of, guys who came through there and went on to do bigger and better things, obviously. So it's like a jump off point for people who are looking to, get their foot in the door, or, experienced journalists who weren't doing it anymore, but maybe had the itch, and it's like, hey, let me, contribute a couple articles. So the business model with, with Vox was always just non-existent, I mean, it's the football sites that make money, the basketball sites, the baseball sites do pretty well, but it's like, how do you, they weren't even really given a lot of money to these hockey and soccer sites to begin with, maybe a couple $1,000s a month at most, spread out over a lot of contributors. So a lot of people are doing it not to make money, but because they just love doing what they were doing, But, to your point, man, it's weird because, I stopped doing the quote unquote beat writing thing in 2017. That's when I left Philly Voice. And, the team just got better and better and better. The union have never been better, man. And I go back, I try to go back to one or two games a year and, sit in the press box and just kind of catch up with everybody. I don't recognize half the people who are up and around in the media area. I mean, Joe's still there and John Tannenwald and Matt DeGeorge. And, there might be a PSP guy there, maybe Mike Cervedio might be there or something, but there's fewer people now in the union press box. And when they're good than there were, 5 or 6 years ago, which is crazy to me. So I just think for any young, aspiring journalist who loves the sport, man, I mean, now's the time to get into it. Right. I mean, cause there's opportunities there, but if you lose sites like Brotherly Game, and I'm not sure what Matt is going to do, what they're going to do, because Yeah, they may be able to buy the sites straight up from Vox, and they have ownership of it, right? Maybe they can install some kind of business model, or maybe they all just want to do it for free and they just love to do it. Just pay for the domain and upkeep and things like that. So yeah, it's disappointing, especially because a lot of those MLS. Yeah, look, the hockey sites, like if the Winnipeg SB Nation site goes under, the Winnipeg newspaper has a full-time guy who covers the Jets, right? But for the Philadelphia Union, there's never been a full-time Philadelphia Union reporter for anything. So I think there's a long-winded answer, but I think the soccer sites were hurt a lot more. The soccer teams were hurt a lot more by that than maybe the NHL teams.
I know I saw you pitch the idea. Maybe Philly. What is it? Crap.
PSP Philly Soccer Page.
Yeah. And Brotherly Games should potentially combine. I mean, both sites have been around forever, and they have a lot of talented writers, and maybe that is a possibility. And I can recall a conversation I was having with someone a couple years ago that's involved in the MLS world, and he asked me if I was making any money doing the podcast covering the Union, and I told him no, and he was like, that's the worst thing in the world. Like, why are you doing this? You're putting a decent amount of money into something and you're getting no results. Like, you're not getting money back. Like, you should just stop what you're doing now. And like, that's always stuck with me because, like I said, majority of these people in the press box are freelance journalists. They're working for these SB Nation sites, and it's not just in Philadelphia, it's all over MLS. And so for somebody to say, why are you doing this for no money and everything? It's like, without those people, the coverage suffers. And I think we're definitely going to see that in some MLS markets.
Yeah, there's been great coverage done by, what we would call these freelance kind of part-time / just come down to the games or whatever. Even, there would be maybe like 20 people in the press box from, pick a time like 2010 to 2018 or something like that. But there'd only ever be like 4 or 5 of us who were down at practice, or they would try to go to road games or whatever. There's never, like I said, there's never been a full-time Philadelphia Union reporter ever. John Tannenwald and Matt DeGeorge are full-time with the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Delco Times, but that's not their only responsibility there, right? So John, I don't think most people know, John does a lot of like work on the desk. He'll do some Eagles stuff, some basketball stuff and whatever, and he happens to be their union person, but he's got other responsibilities at the newspaper. And Matt DeGeorge has been to every high school in Delco doing swimming and volleyball and all that stuff. And like for me, it was the same thing. I was doing shifts at Eyewitness News. I was producing the 10 o'clock show, and I was doing writing shifts. I was working overnights, and then I'd go down to PPL Park on a Saturday. So we were all just, we weren't doing it for the money, man. I can tell you that much. Like, nobody gets into MLS media because they're trying to make money. It's because we love doing it. We wanted to be part of something from the beginning, and because, like, quite frankly, Todd, like I don't think Union fans get enough coverage. There's just not a lot out there for them to consume. So when PSP and Brotherly Game were turning out great content year after year, I was like, that was it was valuable stuff. So I'd just love to. I know the PSP guys, like, were never about making money because it was just like a labor of love, and they wanted it to be a strictly volunteer kind of thing. Brotherly Game, like I said, Vox wasn't putting a lot of money in that to begin with, but I'd love to see somebody start an independent Philadelphia Union site and like really try to like install a business model. I'm not saying you're going to make millions of dollars off of it, but I think Union fans are pragmatic, man. And if there's a good product out there, maybe they'd be willing to pay for it or help out or do what they can to launch it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's no better time to get into the Union when they're so successful. And
I know now's the time, man. Jump on board. Yeah, it's just crazy, man. Like they are the best damn team they've ever been. Like, now, so you want to cover a winner, jump in now and do it.
Absolutely. And to their credit too, all 3 of the PR people at the Union, Amanda, Erica, and Nico, have never had any issues. They've always approved me for stuff. They're so easy to deal with. And I read these comments on Twitter where other podcasters or freelance journalists talk about trying to work with other MLS teams, and they always deny them access. And I'm like, why are you denying people access when they're willing to put in the time and the effort to cover your team? It's like, you're just going to have these just horrible questions asked by the PR people because nobody's showing up at the press conferences, and the press conferences are going to last for like 2 minutes. It's like, it's not good coverage, but some of these markets, that's for sure what's going to happen.
No, you should want, you should want to be, more, you should want to be inclusive as a baseline versus like excluding people, and if you let somebody in and they don't know what they're doing and whatever, then you have a conversation with them. But in as long as I've been around the Union, I can only remember one story of like a Fugazi like credential or whatever. I don't know if I've ever told this story before. I'll tell it I'll tell it on the free kick. There's a guy, I mean, I won't name names or whatever, but there was a guy who came down and he covered the team. But he got his credential pulled just because he was like down in an area like that he wasn't supposed to be in. Like he was down on the field, and I think he lied about like what he was doing down there, like what kind of access he had. Because on your credential, it says your it'll say like the press box, locker room, whatever, right? And then if you get a photographer, it'll say like field, press box, media workroom, or whatever. So this guy just lied about like what access he had. So they pulled his credential, and that was it. But I've never heard of any other issue beyond that. I mean, they've credentialed whoever applies for the most part, as long as you're working for a legit outlet. And I mean, it's been all good. So there's no need to like maybe screening like people and they have to take a test or something like that. No, I mean, you got people who are interested and they want to cover your team, and your team could use more publicity, so
Yeah,
why not?
absolutely. Well, speaking of publicity, we definitely don't get that with the preseason matches because there's been a lot of complaining from people on Union Twitter this preseason about how the live match blogging sucks, where whoever's in charge of blogging, they're not always updating it and you're constantly having to refresh. And a lot of people have asked, why is there no stream to watch? And even you chimed in and said, how's it the year 2023 and we have no stream for these games? And I'm with you. It's only friendlies. Who cares if there's a trialist playing in these games or not? There's clearly a want from MLS fans to watch their team in preseason, to see what the team's doing. And I get it from the team perspective. Maybe they don't want eyes to see, okay, exactly what they're doing. They have a guy in there that they potentially want to sign and everything. But if the guy's good enough, then sign him. Don't say, well, we want to watch you from a couple other games. If somebody else watches that tape and they say, yeah, we want this guy, then that's your loss. Like, it's crazy to me. Like you said, like, we're in 2023 and you guys still aren't streaming games?
Well, and here's the thing too. I mean, that whole thing about like wanting to protect trialists and try to be like you're worried about people identifying. I mean, it's such a small world with agents and players and interest or whatever. Everybody knows who is interested in what player and who's trialing with who. And there really are no secrets here. I mean, like 10 years ago, they used to do open practice at YSC for like the first week of the season, and all the fans would go there, and we'd stand over the side. It would be, I'd be there, John would be there, Matt would be there. Like I know like the guys with the Union Rumors Twitter account, they would be there too, and we'd all be like picking out these trialists and trying to figure out who they are. But the Union weren't hiding anything, because like the Red Bulls knew that Pantelis Kafes was trialing with the with the Union. There wasn't any secret. I mean, it was all. It wasn't like they were saying, oh, now we got to go like scoop this guy and make him a better offer or something like that. It never really worked like that to begin with. So I just think it's crazy because you look at how much hype there was, and they're coming off an MLS Cup appearance. And you imagine if you're like the Phillies coming off of World Series appearance, and they're like, oh, we're not going to, broadcast Grapefruit League. It'd be insane. How in 2023 with all the technology that we have, how hard is it for some like intern to point a phone and just like move it back and forth? It's just, I think they kind of shoot themselves in the foot there a little bit, because there's a demand for this. I see people on Union Twitter who like want to watch this stuff, and they're not providing it. So I think that's a lost opportunity there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being a Baltimore Orioles fan, where the Orioles have sucked for God knows how long, we look forward to preseason, to spring training, to watch, the prospects that were lighting it up in the minors. We want to see them get at bats with the major league team in preseason and see, okay, well, if this guy's legit, maybe he has a chance to make the roster out of spring training. And so it's the same thing with soccer. And you said it. Coming off of that high of the final loss to LAFC, fans are invested in this team. You have brand new fans that are now getting into this team, which we talked about on your show. Going to Apple may hurt that a little bit, where people don't want to get another subscription. But yeah, it's crazy to me where like all you have to do is set up a camera that's going to track and you're good to go. It doesn't have to be the best quality or anything. You don't need commentary. Just follow the ball around, follow the plays. And I think fans would be happy with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not asking for too much, right? I mean, when they've done it in the past, some of the camera angles have just been kind of, whatever, but nobody expects it to be, like a Fox broadcast or anything. I just think it's like, it's counterintuitive to think that you have you have people who want to watch this stuff, and there's a demand for it, and you're coming off of you have the greatest season that you've ever had, and you want to try to keep people engaged. I think that's the one thing too that hurts because they're so Ernst is so buttoned up, and nothing ever leaks out of there, and I would make the argument to their PR team that I would actually try to engage in that a little bit more, and I would try to let a little bit of information out just to keep people interested and like, hey, they're doing stuff, and just try to keep yourselves in the news cycle, and like give yourself some headlines and whatnot, and try to keep people engaged over the off season. But I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's like, hey, I'm trying to sell people on the Union. It's like, oh, the preseason comes around. Oh, we can't even watch it, and then the guy blogging it like forgets. It's like, we might as well get like the AI to blog it or something like big chat GPT, right?
Yeah,
write me
coming.
a live blog for a preseason game, so.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is so crazy, but I don't know. Maybe with Apple taking over things, maybe next year they say, okay, you guys have to stream these preseason games. One could hope, right?
But yeah, I mean, then that would be a good thing for Apple too to do. It's not that hard, right?
They have the
I'm sure
money,
there'd
the
be people.
technology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that their crews would love to do that too. I mean, the Union used to do. Yeah, I mean, they used to have preseason games where I want to say like Jonathan Yardley may have been doing like play by play for them. But yeah, it's just weird that we had that at one point and now we don't have it again. You know what I mean? So it's not just that like, oh, we've never had it. Like at one point they did do it. So
Yeah, and last season you watched the Cincinnati game in preseason, and then that was the only one they had. And the rest of the games were behind closed doors, and you go back to the live blogs being non-existent, really.
I'll tell you a quick story. 2014 was the last time that I was with the Union, and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, slept in and then went to a Flyers game with her friend. It started like snowing like crazy, so they went down and they got drunk there, and they went to Xfinity Live. I picked them up and drove them home in the snow. She fell asleep on the couch, and I told the other friend who was with her, I said, I'm trying to watch this Union preseason game. He's like, all right, yeah, let's go back to your place and watch it. Or he turned on the TV. He's like, what channel is it on? Like, it's not on TV, man. I'm going to pull it up on my computer, like Philadelphia Union. We were sitting there, like my wife's passed out on the couch, and we're watching like preseason at like Raymond, at like whatever the Tampa Bay Rowdies stadium is. We're watching like preseason Union soccer down there, and just like, I don't know, it's like a miserable like Saturday, like January, like 10 feet of snow on the ground or something. But yeah, I mean, like even 10 years ago, you could watch the preseason streams on your computer. So it's crazy to think that you can't do it now.
Yeah, it is crazy, and somehow we've taken a step back. But let's go on and talk about another topic about the possibility of the Union winning a trophy this season. Jim Curtin said a few weeks ago that they will play for every trophy this season, and that's all good and everything. But I am curious, just how realistic is that with this current Union roster? Because when I was going over notes for whenever I decide to record my season predictions, I noticed in the first half of the season, the Union could potentially play 28 games if they're still in the CONCACAF Champions League and US Open Cup. And some of those league games will have to be moved around to accommodate Champions League and US Open Cup games. But is it possible that the Union decide, hey, look, we're not going to focus on the league. We're going to focus on the U.S. Open Cup, the CONCACAF Champions League, where the Union could potentially play 2 games a week, where we're used to watching them only playing 1. So, I mean, do you think they have the squad to play multiple games a week?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're going to have to figure. I mean, I guess that's why they went and got Damian Lowe and Joaquin Torres and Andres Perea for sure. But yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, feels like it was eons ago, but they didn't really, when they had that run in the Champions League early a couple of years ago, they didn't get off to the hottest start in the league, so I think that's what that kind of goes on the back burner a little bit, because you're like, we can play our way back into this. We have a ton of domestic games that we're going to be able to get back to one of the top spots here. So I think they make their focus more on the Champions League early for sure. And they have a good draw in the Champions League too, because they're on the side of the bracket that only has one of the Liga MX teams, right? So Atlas is on their side. But I mean, the other teams that are in their group, I mean, they play Alianza, right? And then Olympia, LAFC is in that side too, but it's Alajuelense, the Whitecaps, and Real España, right? So, I mean, you go to the other side, I mean, that's where you get Tigres and Leon and Pachuca, so I mean, it reminds me almost of Well, they could get Atlas in the second round, but yeah, I mean, when they've got a crappy Saprissa team that was kind of on a downturn, and then they got Atlanta United. I mean, that was like a great boon, you know. And obviously, Club America was the better team, but we all knew that. But I think it's probably going to play out similar to what we saw a couple years ago, or maybe the first couple MLS games are like, whatever. But the focus is on Champions League. That's probably where it should be, because those are one. I mean, you're going to play 7-8 months of MLS games. I mean, Champions League, you could go out right away, so that's got to be the focus.
Yeah, I agree with you, and especially when like all the rest is coming in the second half of the season because the U.S. Open Cup and Champions League is pretty much going to be done in the first half of the season. Like you mentioned, you still have all those MLS games you can play in the second half, so it's like, yeah, why not put your priority in the U.S. Open Cup if you're serious about trying to get back to a final and hopefully winning it this time or a Champions League? I mean, we saw what Seattle did last year, and why can't that be the Philadelphia Union? And like you mentioned, the Union have the quote-unquote easier side of the bracket. So, I mean, anything's possible, and I would love to see the Union go all in on the Champions League like we saw 2 years ago. The U.S. Open Cup, I know fans were a little bit upset last year. They felt like the Union just gave that up when they went down to Orlando, played their B squad, where some people said they should have played the B team against LAFC and then played their starters against Orlando. And we all know Jim Curtin did not do that. He said, look, we still tried to play to win against Orlando, and they fell short in that game against Orlando, and Orlando went on to eventually win the U.S. Open Cup.
But then they went to MLS Cup, So to me, it was like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it was like that justified it for me. I mean, they were penalty kicks away. They were 2 minutes away from winning it all. So at that point, to me, like the U.S. Open Cup is a distant memory, and it's almost like, after they went to 3 Open Cup finals and lost all of them, I was kind of, I don't know, maybe it was like post-traumatic stress disorder or something, but I was like, I don't, if they're going to toss anything, toss the Open Cup, so it just like brings back bad memories or whatever. But I would prioritize Champions League for sure, and the league, and I just don't care too much about the Open Cup. I don't know, maybe the draw turns out differently this year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, myself, it goes MLS Cup, CONCACAF, Supporters Shield, US Open Cup. You can flip them. And then this League Nations, yeah, I cannot care about that competition against Liga MX. Yeah. I mean, that's a competition I wish the Union would just say, you know what, we're going to rest our starters for the second half of the season. We're going to play a whole bunch of Union 2 guys, and whatever happens, happens. But I don't know. I mean, Jim Curtin says we're going to go for everything, so I'm sure he's probably not going to play the B squad in the League Nations.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's that's going to be predicated on what happens in these other competitions. I mean, you're kind of stuck with the chronology of what comes first and what comes next, and you could kind of take stock of. I mean, you could lay out a plan right now. If you and I were in the boardroom or whatever, we could say, okay, we're going to prioritize Champions League, and then we're going to prioritize this or whatever. But if they're like, in the Champions League final, then yeah, okay, then we're going to put more resources to that. We may send Brandon Craig out to start in Minnesota or something. So it's gonna. I mean, that's not really a profound thing to say, but I mean, of course, the course is going to set itself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and they're having that conversation. I mean, what Jim Curtin says to the public, and I'll give him credit, he's an honest guy with the reporters. He's not a guy who shies away from a question. I mean, he's pretty open, and maybe you say otherwise, but from what I've got to know from Jim, he seems to answer whatever anybody asks of him, and usually what he says is nothing but the truth. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully they prioritize Champions League, US Open Cup, second half of the seasons when you can go all in for the league. But I don't think, some people say, Supporters Shield, go for that again. I don't know. I think that's kind of out of the question with all these competitions that the Union are in. I mean, if it happens, great, but we already won a Supporters Shield. So it's like, yeah, I don't care about winning that again.
Yeah, and it's hard to say too, like, if you are first place in the league in June or whatever, like, well, we're gonna, not play our full strength team in the U.S. Open Cup because we want to win the Shield. We still got like 17 games left for that, so you can't let the Shield kind of make this, decide how you're going to approach these other things if you're like months out from that being resolved anyway. To me, the Shield is great if you can win it, but my priorities would be Champions League and MLS Cup for sure. If I had to rank them in order, I would say MLS Cup, or I would say Champions League, then I would say MLS Cup, and then I would say US Open Cup. Supporter Shield, and then I don't even remember what the hell the Nations League. What are we calling it? Right. Okay, that's how much I care
Leagues
about.
Cup,
Yeah,
something. Yeah, so
Leagues
bad.
Cup. I mean, it'll be cool to see them play. Who's in the bracket? Querétaro and Tijuana. Okay, I mean, it'd be good to see them play those teams, but it doesn't mean anything. So they're playing in the Champions League already. They're probably going to play a League MX team in the Champions League. So I don't care about the Garber League or whatever the hell they want to call it. Can you tell I'm not into that?
I mean, like, how awesome would that be? The Union win the CONCACAF Champions League, and now they're playing against potentially Real Madrid or something like that. Could we get you to fly out and cover the game with Crossing Broad?
That I would, yeah, that I would find a way. I would fly myself out there. By the way, what happened? So who's Seattle playing in the Club World Cup? Who won that other game yesterday or the other day?
The Egyptian team, I believe, and then the winner that plays Real Madrid. So
there you go. So the Seattle Sounders are one game away from playing Real Madrid. Something that actually matters. That's cool, man. That's really cool.
I mean, it could potentially be the Union one day. I mean, I can't imagine that. I mean, look, I didn't think the Union would get to MLS Cup as fast as they did. But to try to think of the Union playing in a FIFA Club World Cup, yeah, that would be fantastic.
I know, man. It's awesome. And I think it'll just be cool because I don't think an MLS team has ever played a game against a European team in anything that matters, because this is the only time that they could ever do it, So yeah, so it's Al Ahly. Yeah, it's Saturday at noon
on Fox.
Seattle versus Al Ahly. Yeah. How about it?
Yeah, it should be a good game.
Yeah, but still
go MLS.
Feels weird. Yeah.
So weird. But we talked about on your show that we're happy with the roster. Maybe we'd like to see another striker added to the roster, but overall, we're happy with it. And I asked Jim Curtin this when we were at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and I asked if he could bring back one former Union player in the prime of their overall career, not the prime when they were with the Union, but their overall career. If he could bring back one player in this current Union squad for one season, who would he bring in? So, Kevin, I'm going to ask you the same question. Who would you bring in?
Well, wait, first off, what did he say?
Okay, I'll tell you what he said. So, first name, like, he didn't even think. He said Barnetta. He just went straight there, and then he's like...
Tranquillo Barnetta,
yeah. I mean, great player for the Union. Too bad that he was only here, it felt like, for a couple games, and then
his prime, I guess his prime was at Leverkusen, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what Jim said in the Bundesliga. That's what a player was, even with the national team too. I mean,
Switzerland.
It's kind of wild that the Union were able to get him. I know it was at the end of his career, but still to see Barnetta play in a Union jersey, and we'll always have that free kick goal that he scored. So
it was crazy, man. At that point, I was like, I can't believe a guy like this is coming to play over here. I remember exactly where I was. I went down to the Tranquillo Barnetta introductory press conference, and then I drove like immediately back to Center City, Philadelphia, and signed the paperwork on we bought our first house. Like I said, they gave me a stack of papers, like the biggest stack of papers I've ever seen. But yeah, that was 2015. He was coming over here. They had just gotten Bedoya, I want to say, or they had Bedoya. Yeah, I remember he was like playing the wing or something. Yeah, but I mean, that was crazy. That was good. So I'll tell you something about Tranquillo Barnetta. The connection there was Oka Nikolov, because Oka played at Eintracht Frankfurt with Tranquillo for a season. Tranquillo played with Frankfurt, I think, like 1 year after Leverkusen, and so that was his connection to the Union and to MLS was Oka Nikolov.
That's an awesome story. Now I think Oka's the goalkeeper coach with LAFC after going down to DC after he left the Union, now with LAFC. It is kind of crazy when you look at these players or managers that have like been at bigger clubs and then they find their way to the Union and everything. It's like, how did this happen? Who else did Jim say? I'm trying to remember. Like, he started naming a whole bunch of other players. He's had Harris in his prime with his left foot. He's like, I don't want to. He's like, I don't want to leave anybody out and have players mad at me. But yeah, the first guy he went to right away was Tranquillo. Yeah,
I'll give you. So I wrote down 4. It's a good question. I guess you said on Always Soccer that you didn't really start following the Union until like 16 or 17, right? So I think all these guys predate your time, but the first guy I immediately thought of was Gabriel Gomez, who played one season here in 2012, and I think people forget about the 2012 season because it was like a disaster and Peter got fired and all that. But Gabriel Gomez was a bulldog box-to-box midfielder, scored 6 goals for the team back then, and he played 150 times for Panama. And he would be like the perfect number 8 shuttler in this system. He's just a great 2-way player, just a good nose for goal, like just a hard like Gattuso kind of player, like Gabriel Gomez. Prime, he probably should have kept playing in MLS. I mean, he bounced around, um, like the Caribbean and other places in Costa Rica and whatever, and different CONCACAF, whatever. But he was always good enough to play in MLS. The other guy that came to mind immediately was Eduardo Coudet, who played here who only played like 9 games here, and they signed him halfway through the first season in 2010. And then he went on to become a coach. But Chacho Coudet in his like prime was starting for River Plate and was a really, really good like Argentine playmaker. I don't know if it's Argentine or Argentinian. I don't know what the hell the difference is. He was from Argentina and he was really good. That's all anybody needs to know. Chacho Coudet was great. I would have loved to have him in his prime. Veljko Paunovic, of course. They got him for the second half of 2011, and then he ended up coaching the Fire. But Veljko, everybody hated that signing at the time. I remember they called him like the old Serbian guy. Why did we sign the old Serbian guy? And he ended up scoring a couple bangers for the Union, and they went to the playoffs for the first time ever. But I don't think people realize like prime Veljko was starting for Atletico Madrid. He was a guy from the old Yugoslavia, but he came over to Spain and played a lot of years in Spain, so he speaks Spanish, and now he's coaching Guadalajara. So, but he was great in his prime. And the final guy I thought of was Farid Mondragon. He was the goalkeeper here in 2011. He was good, but he was like 40 at the time, and Farid didn't make a bunch of like amazing saves, but he was an incredible like organizer. And he had Danny Califf and he had Carlos Valdez in front of him, and that was just a really fantastic defensive Union team. But I mean, prior to that, he had played 180 games for Galatasaray, and he had started for the Colombia in like the 1994 World Cup, I want to say. So he was a guy who was experienced. But yeah, I mean, during the early years, the Union got a lot of these great dudes who were just on the back end of their career. So you could take any one of those dudes in their primes and plug them in here, and they would have been fantastic.
Okay, here we go. Quick question. You said Valdez. I mean, would you take Valdez over Jacob Glesnes or Jack Elliott?
Oh God. I love Carlos Valdez more than anything. I mean, I'd probably talk about him on Always Soccer more than anything. I think that the 2011, 2012 seasons that he had was some of the best center back play in Philadelphia Union history. But no. I mean, Jacob Glesnes and Jack Elliott's the best center backs that the Union have ever had. I mean, one of them won MLS Defender of the Year. The other one probably should have been on the short list, So as much as I love that, Danny Califf and Carlos Valdez pairing, and as good as Maurice Adu was for that stretch there too, I mean, Jacob and Jack are the best center backs that they've ever had.
There you go. You have it. Yeah, we discussed that, like me and Billy, when we were at the convention, we asked our best 11 ever for the Philadelphia Union, and we both put Valdez in our starting 11. But I mean, you can definitely make the argument for Jacob Glesnes and Jack Elliott. So we
did you have Glesnes? Did you have Glesnes and Valdez? Is that what you ended?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
you could do that, man. It was weird because Carlos was an all-star in 2012, but that was a really, really weird year because they traded Danny Califf, and then they were playing some 3 at the back, and they were doing some other stuff. But there was a stretch of maybe 15, 20 games where Carlos was just just completely locked in and had some of the best center back play that I've ever seen for this team. And if you look at where they went after that, they had Amobi and Aaron Wheeler playing center back. So they moved a midfielder and a striker back there. And, for a stretch of probably 2013 to 2017, they really did not have a stud center back, on the team. So there's a big gap there for a while, but I mean, man, they got it right now.
They do, absolutely. Yeah, the player that I would go with, bring him back, I said either Elsinho or Kleberson's the player I would go with, play him as an 8. I mean, he was great with Brazil back in the day. I mean,
played in a World Cup final.
Yeah, exactly. Helped Brazil win that final in 2002. Yeah. I mean, I know when he made the move to Manchester United, didn't live up to the hype that he had with Brazil. I know he only played like 11 games with the Union, scored a free kick, I believe. But yeah, I would love to see him in the prime of his career play as one of those shuttlers for this Union team. I mean, there are a lot of great Union players that came late in their careers to the Union. I mean, that could be an episode in itself, like players that were in the prime of their career who would make like the best XL for the Union. I don't know, maybe that's a topic for another day, but
It's a good exercise too. You could even do, like you can put together your best 11 of previous Union players and then put them up against last year's team. And would that best 11 beat last year's team? Because I think like the best 11 could probably make could be made up of like the best Union players of all time, Kai Wagner and all that. I'm trying to find the okay, so I was vamping there. So I pulled up the 2002 World Cup final, and here's who started for Brazil. Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos, Kleberson, Gilberto Silva, Cafu, Roque Jr., Lucio, and Ed Mielson. So Kleberson, who played for the Philadelphia Union for a little bit, was good enough to start in a World Cup final alongside Roberto Carlos and Lucio and all these legendary players, and then they brought off the bench, they brought in Danielson and Juninho Paulista, not the Juninho who hit all the free kicks in France, but the one I think who played for Middlesbrough, I want to say. So yeah, I mean, that's cool though. It was funny because the Union had Kleberson played in a World Cup, Fried Mondragon played in a World Cup. I don't know if Danny Califf ever did, but those early years, man, even though the Union weren't that good, man, they had some great guys, but they were just like at the tail end of their careers,
Absolutely. And I mean, Brazil, they would kill to have a squad like that now. I mean, it's crazy watching Brazil just choke in all these major tournaments and not make it far in the World Cup where, they were the team back in the day. But last one before I let you go, Kevin. So I finally looked at some of the content on Apple TV, and I was looking at the Union's club profile video that they made, and they had a segment on there called Club Legends. And so obviously, I mean, they had guys like Latu, they had Bedoya, Blake, Elsinho, and then the last legend, they said, Brenden Aaronson. Can somebody please explain to me how Brenden Aaronson's a club legend? Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, I love the kid and everything. 7 goals, 5 assists, only 3,610 minutes. I mean, we had some players pushing that number last season for the Union in one season. And in Brendan's 2 years with the Union, I mean, a club legend, it makes no sense to me.
No, and Brenden kind of got the marketing push as being an academy kid and being an American guy and being a good story. And, here's the hottest new prospect. He got the DeAndre Yedlin treatment that DeAndre got in 2013, Brenden was named like best 11, right?
Yep.
And I remember I was like texting, I guess I shouldn't name the person. I was texting another Union media guy, and I'm like, and he's like, he messaged me and he's like, I don't think Brendan's even like a top 5 most important player on this team. I was like, I think I probably agree with you on that, but it was just, it was a great story. I mean, it was a young kid, came through the academy, went overseas on a big transfer. So they pump Brenden. I love Brenden as much as anybody, but yeah, they do pump him up a little bit to the point where it's like, I'm not going to put his name on the club legend list, and I'm not going to put him on the Ring of Honor next to Sebastian. So.
I can make a better argument that Marco Fabian's a bigger club legend than Brenden Aaronson because of that game-winning goal he scored against the Red Bulls in the playoffs in 2019. Like,
well, I think so here's a question for you: Who do you think is the next person to go up on the Ring of Honor?
Bedoya.
Yeah, Bedoya or Blake, whoever leaves first. Yeah, Andre or Ali. And some of these other guys from this team, I don't know if they're going to be around long enough to like. I don't want to use the word qualify because there are no qualifications. Like, I mean, if you only played here one season, but you scored 100 goals, then you would go on the Ring of Honor. But, likewise, people were saying, should Ray go on there? Should Ray Gaddis go on there? Could just for longevity purposes. And it's like, I don't know. You could ask yourself that question too, but good discussions to have. It's like any like stupid rock and roll Hall of Fame, like a baseball Hall of Fame or something. We could sit there and argue about it for forever because everybody's going to make up their own parameters and decide what matters and what doesn't matter to them,
Man, seeing the list of the people that got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2023, what a joke. Like,
don't even get me started on that. We'll be here until like midnight tonight talking. It is the Free Kick podcast, not the
rock and roll.
bitch about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Man, what are we gonna do? But Kevin, it's been a blast having you on the podcast. And for people that aren't following you on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's at Kevin_Kinkead. I'm with Cross and Broad now. We do the occasional Union story, and the Phillies fans get mad when I write about soccer, but too bad, I'm in charge now. so we're gonna throw the Union up there when I feel like it. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with the post-game show this year. I don't know if there's going to be one. I'm not even sure if I'm going to be part of it if there is, but hopefully Sean and John will be able to give everybody a heads up on that sometime soon. But yeah, it's always soccer in Philadelphia as well. And yeah, it was fun, man. I'm glad we could do this and do a little crossover thing and give people something to listen to while they wait for a few more weeks until this thing starts up.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys didn't listen to part 1, go ahead and check it out at It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia's feed. And if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcasts, The Free Kick, thefreekick.net to check out the coverage. Shout out Kyle Almany for writing his first article on the site. So I appreciate that, Kyle. And yeah, like Kevin said, don't know how much more content is going to come out until the start of the season, maybe 2 episodes. Maybe we'll get a match preview for Columbus and then my season predictions. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.